So welcome everyone to the webinar today. My name is Megan Guidry. I am training lead here at New Zealand eScience Infrastructure. And our webinar topic today is RMarkdown for researchers, weave together narrative text and code, presented by NeSI application specialist Matt Bixley. Before we dive into the webinar, I just have a few simple housekeeping items to cover. Pretty basic stuff. So while Matt's presenting today, we just ask that you remember to keep your audio on mute so we don't have any echoes or any distracting sounds in the background. But if at any point in time you have a question, we do have a question document, and I'm going to post the link to that in the chat right now. So let me copy that link and find the chat box, which always seems to hide itself. There we go. So that document is just for you to put some of your thoughts as the workshop, as the webinar, I should say, is happening. And we have some NeSI staff on standby to answer those questions that you put in that document. So we're also going to try to allow some time for questions and discussion at the end, or perhaps throughout the webinar. If you're really dying to say something or to add a comment, perhaps we can make a little routine. If you put hand in the chat, as I'm doing right now, so that kind of signals raise your hand if you're really wanting to say something. We do have quite a few people in the Zoom room. So we can try unmuting ourselves as we go, but it could get a little chaotic. So if you want to raise your hand, you can do that, and I'll make sure that I interrupt Matt and we get you a chance to ask a question verbally. Lastly, the webinar recording and materials will be available on NeSI website in the next few days. If you've registered for the webinar, I will be flicking you that recording via email as well, so you'll get notified once that's posted. So because it is being recorded, if you don't want to appear on the recording, make sure your video is turned off by clicking the icon on the bottom left of your screen. So that's all from me for now. Take it away, Matt.
Hello, everybody. I'm not sure, I can't see my own face on the screen, so hopefully everybody else can. I'm not even really sure where we're going to go to today. We're going to talk about Markdown and in the frame of RMarkdown, probably, and within using RStudio. And it'll be kind of some show and tell, and we'll look at different parts of Markdown documents. I don't really think we'll do some live coding. And yeah, like as Megan said, feel free to jump in with questions at any time, and I will try and answer them. I'm not an expert. I can't do everything that I know you can do within Markdown, but I know where to find resources. So I'm going to attempt now to share a screen. Now I would like to share, I'm going to share that screen there. So can you see, can everybody see a GitHub repo? Could I have some thumbs up? I've got Albert, oh, I can look at, I can turn to the side and look at my colleague Albert's computer, and I can see. So I've got a GitHub repo for what we're going to go through today, Markdown lessons. And the link, I'll chuck that link over into chat, Google Sheet. Somewhere, throwing that into the Google Sheet. You can download, if you are an R user, using and have use this package, you can download this whole repo to your desktop and open up the project that I'm going to work through. And I have a source script, a setup script. I'm not sure you should run that off the bat. It will, if there are a number of packages there that if you don't have them may take some time to download. So, I mean, perhaps that's something for the future. So we're going to have a look at some introductory Markdown. Hopefully we'll write a reproducible report. We'll talk about why you'd want to do that. Setup, code chunks, tables, plots, captions and figures. Now I first got into Markdown and kind of the RStudio environment when I was working in the biochemistry department, and we had a particular project. We had sequenced around 100 or 1,000 human. Oh, cool! I can see on there. Let's toggle that. We'd sequenced 1,000 human genomes, and I was assisting a whole lot of researchers grab out information from those 1,000 genomes, and they were grabbing them out. They were wanting specific genes, and so I was trying to write them a summary report at the same time from a gene. And Markdown became a really useful way to do this. I didn't have to rewrite my code. I didn't have to go and look at where did I get the code from that made the particular report, or how a plot was made. Everything was all tied in together, and that's kind of why we want to do this and use Markdown to make a reproducible environment, to tie everything in together and share it with people. So this is a Markdown document that you can see on the screen. I think, hopefully, this is the base of it. I'll go into discussing that in a moment, but I'm going to knit that. Knit is something we do a lot of. And I'm waiting for it. Why are you not popping up? Something's happening in the background. Cool. Sometimes it'll take time to knit. I think because we have a lot of things open, or because I'm sharing screens. Here we go. So this document here that I've got on screen, looking at Albert's computer, is a Markdown document. My preferred format is HTML. I mean, HTML is computer readable, so I can share this with somebody. They don't have to have Word. They can use a computer to interrogate the document, and we'll kind of go through and have a look at some of the different things that we've done in here. But I'm going to jump back to one step back and start looking at what makes up a Markdown document. And so I'm in RStudio. And we could do this in other environments, but we're in RStudio. And so if I go File, New File, Markdown, we'll keep it as an untitled document. And we get a template come up. At the very top, highlighted, we have what's known as the YAML, or yet another markup language. This is our header, and where we start to build up some default values for our document. So we can throw in a title and change that here to my draft, a draft paper, an author. We can put in our date, our output format, so an HTML document, and a variety. There are lots of things that we can put into our YAML, and we'll touch on some of those a bit later on. And then we go into code chunks. And code chunks within a Markdown document are set, or in an RMarkdown document, are set up with 3 backticks. 3 backticks to begin and 3 backticks to end. So at the beginning, very, very simple document. HTML, my draft, spelling, my draft paper, and again, we could knit that. my draft. And we'll knit our very first simple document. It's taken over from the one that I had open previously. Very, very simple. I changed the my draft. We have an author, and then we go into the different parts of a Markdown document. Super, super, super simple. So let's close that one and let's open up. I'm going to reopen. Oh no, I won't. Yeah, we'll do that. We'll view in browser. The beauty of HTML, view in browser, so you can view it on your phone. Right, here is resizing everything. Apologies. We want not that. Let's minimize that. Studio, sorry. Now we can look at the side by side. Side by side, on the right-hand side, we've got our finalized document, which is the notes for the course, more or less, or the webinar we're going to have, and then our main HTML that generated our document. So I said up in the very beginning, up in the YAML, we had a title, so we had our intro to Markdown, and I've added in a subtitle. And I've added in some more formatting. So a single underscore will make, looking on the right-hand side, a single underscore will make italicized values. We've got our author, date. We can hard code our date, or we can use, I'm using R, so I'm using system date. So I can get the system date out of when I knit my document. I like to use system date because it gives some kind of indication of what's the word I'm looking for? So an additional level of version control. Our output, we have again our HTML document, and in this one here, with the HTML document, I really like to have code folding. So if we look up on the right-hand side of our document, you can see a highlighted function, code. And I can use the drop-down menu, and I can show all the code or hide all the code. May or may not be useful, but if I show all the code and then scroll down into the document, we can see all the code that we are using to generate whether we're generating a plot or a table or things. And we can hide individual sections of code or unhide. Again, all around reproducibility. What made this plot? What made this table? And as paper, I think with a lot of literature today and a lot of journals, they want everything to be reproducible. You've got to be able to provide your code. And if somebody asks you about it, well, here's my code. This is the code that made the plot, and you don't have to go looking for it. There's other things that we've got looking going on the left-hand side. There's other things, parts of the YAML header. I've got there's lots of things that we can do. A table of contents is pretty cool. So I've added table of contents, and so this will auto-generate, much like Word will auto-generate. You can have Word auto-generate tables. It's floating. We can see here, if I click on the different parts of the document, it'll flick us through or float us through the table and auto number, numbering of the sections. We can add a bibliography for using our citations. We can have citation styles, and I'll touch a little bit more on those in the future. and always allow HTML. Yes, so there's a lot of things that can go into the YAML header. I don't profess to know all of them. I've started to cheat within my RMarkdown documents and use some of the shortcuts. So if I look in RStudio, there we have up in the top of my RStudio, I have the wheel, and if I look at the wheel, so it's editing the Markdown document. If I use the drop down there and scroll down to output options, I can change a lot of the table settings there. So a lot of the YAML settings are set up here, applying a theme, how we want our table to be outputted. I tend to set mine as a cable format because I use Cable Extra. Again, I'll touch on this a little bit later. Can we format the system date? Oh, you're almost certainly able to do that. Let's say if we put asterisks on either side of the text, it should then bold that, or if we put a single underscore, it would italicize that. If you can dream of it within Markdown, you'll probably be able to do it. The figures that will go on to produce later, you can define default sizes for plots, figures that you're making. Again, other settings, and they'll automatically change things within our YAML header. If we go back to make our new Markdown, our very simplified Markdown, and if I choose, go down there, output options, I can change. So at the moment it's on a HTML. I could change that to a PDF. Default, we're not going to do anything with the table of contents. Figures, it's a different set of figure sizes. PDF, LaTeX. Setting things to PDF limits what we're able to do in the table settings. Syntax highlighting, and if I click OK there, it automatically changes some of the settings within the YAML header. So again, I don't profess to know off the top of my head what most of those are. I use the embedded systems to help me do that. Looking over on the right, Denny's added a comment around some of the formatting. Yeah, for sure. You can specify what parts of the date you would like to come out from the R system date. Right. So that's the YAML header. That's the kind of setting up how we want our document to look. Again, yeah. So we could make it a PDF, or we could make it a Word document. There's actually around about, I think Hugh Auger, who wrote Markdown, I think there are 14 different output types for the Markdown type document that you'd like to make. If I click on 1.2 notes, Murray Cadzow, a colleague that I have within biochemistry and who is on the advisory panel for Markdown. He gave a Markdown webinar last year, and he has some notes as well. And I'm trying to look at his notes. He had, where all that? No, he hasn't. I can't see his notes for things. I've thrown away my HTML document. I'll bring it back. Open in a browser. Here we go. Cool. So if I scroll through that, so 1.2, if we roll down a wee bit, I had a few setup functions in this document. So again, so here's within an R code, I tend to have a bit of a setup to start with. I'm an R tidyverse user rather than base R. I'm agnostic on base R versus tidyverse, but I tend to do a lot of things in tidyverse now. My tables, I make my tables with Cable Extra, and I've imported a particular data set, Palmer penguins from Ellison Horst, rather than using cars. Headers, levels of headers. A single hashtag will give us a big bold header. We can see there, Markdown, reasonably bold. 2 hashtags, it comes down 1 level of header. You can see if I highlight bullet pointing, so I've used a dash and it creates a single bullet point, and then I've indented and used an asterisk, and we can see we've got an indented, so you can make nice bullet pointed tables. You can make numbered tables. Plotting, pretty sure plotting only has 1 T. We can embed, well, what are we looking at? What have I written here? Notes, oh, these were Murray's notes from last year. He created a HackMD. HackMD is a different style of Markdown. Nice, interactive, user-friendly, kind of like Google Docs. Nice for sharing documents. Scrolling through, we've got an example of some more code examples. Now we come down, we can see adding, writing for more so I've underlined, I've highlighted Markdown, made it italicized, hyperlinks that you can click on. The beauty of HTML, I can click on from the document and open up an RStudio Markdown document, or Houaget's the definitive Markdown, the definitive guide. Why does my HTML, sorry, why does my HTML keep disappearing? Open, back up. Again, yeah, links. One thing really cool about Markdown is citations. I find the use of citation, or the ability to cite things within our Markdown, super handy. So as you can see in the HTML document on the right hand side, we've got a bracket and J et al. 2010. So this is where I added up in the beginning, up at the top I said I had a bibliography file. I made a very, very simplified one. And we can add a citation with square brackets at Markdown. So whatever the bib file, whatever the reference part of the bib file was, so Markdown 2018, and that pops out as Houaget. I have another one. Did I have? I haven't cited Ellison Horst just yet. But it's super handy, and I find it much easier to do citations within Markdown than within Word. Clicking knit, yeah, so bolded text there with a couple of asterisks. We can highlight code nicely with single backticks. And we can write inline code. If I could on the fly, we could write some inline code. I could do one plus one backtick. Actually, what we want to do would be go 1 + 1 equals. We could on the fly, watch our document change, possibly watch our document change on the right. We always dangerous modifying things as you go along. Waiting to knit. Knitting slowly. I think Megan's slowed my computer up with the webinar being open. Cool. Right. Did I? Yes, I did. It worked. We had some success with on the fly. So I added some inline code. So you can see here I wrote in text 1+1, which is what we have here, 1+1. And then I've added some inline code, R, so using R, 1+1, and has given the output. Super handy when you're like writing a paper and you're having to, I don't know, you're talking about your data set. We analyzed 2,000 samples, but instead of having to know 2,000 samples, you could put inline text and say write R n row of your data set. Because if you modify your data set somewhere along the lines, you now don't have to change, copy and find and copy and paste that particular piece of text. You could, it just becomes inline back to this reproducible. Palmer penguins. So, right, now let's have a look at tables. Kind of looking at tables, formatting for an inline, formatting for a hyperlink. Scrolling down, Palmer penguins, pretty neat data set. Adding a code, and so then a new code chunk, inline code chunk. Let's make that a little bit smaller. What are we? 12:30. An inline code chunk can hide the code, and so we get a printout. But what we really want to do is make some make much nicer tables. So the simplest table we could do would be to count our penguins, and using cable extra, or sorry, using cable, we add a caption. So species counts, we get a species counts. But that's a pretty ugly table. It's not particularly pretty. So I tend to use cable extra. It works really nicely with HTML. I'll show you some more packages shortly. So a longer line of code, but we can now print out a more elegant looking table around some of our summary data. Now, if I jump over to, I'm moving over to a different Markdown document, Markdown GT, because GT is another good program for tables. So we'll knit this one. Cable extra, Huxtable is another one, and GT, grammar of tables. I kind of suggest you pick one and try and be an expert at it, and be familiar or have an idea about other ones. GT is really good. I think GT was written by Thomas Mock. I'm not 100% sure if GT was written by Thomas Mock, who's involved in a lot of RStudio or R development. And so let's open this one. I'll pull that out about a little bit wider, scroll to the top. So within this Markdown document, I've got hyperlinks to cable extra, Huxtable, and GT, exploring the grammar of tables in R. But now we can start using, creating some kind of cool looking tables using the tidyverse and more elegant and start. So again, we can hide our code or bring our code back and look at our tables. This looks a bit better. Our column headers look a bit ugly though. We've broken up our data into the different islands and got some summary data and things out. We can add a summary row so we take our first table, T1. So we take our first table and then we're going to add some summary rows. And we get some summary data out about things. There's some formatting numbers. So again, GT isn't my table of choice, but I don't know, maybe I don't do a lot of research anymore, so I don't make tables, but I probably would like to use it a bit more. We can add additional headers and footers to our table. Now, this is where we start getting into really neat looking tables, and this is where GT does come into itself. So we've taken table 3 and we're going to add a footnote. We can add another footnote and headers, and now we start looking, now we're starting getting into the kind of table that you might see in a paper with footnote. So one being in millimeters and 2 being in grams, and yeah, a lot more elegant looking tables. So that's a brief touch on tables. If I bring back my main document, we'll scroll down, tables, Palmer penguins. Same thing with plots. We can do everything we would like to do for plots. Make a nice plot, add captions. Adding figures to a caption is a little bit more difficult, but there are like auto. When I say figures, I mean auto numbering figures is a little bit more difficult. But if you Google away and use Markdown, there you can work out how to do that. Equations. So if I scroll, we've made our plot and equations. So we can use LaTeX to add equations, whether it's inline, as we've got here for the first one. So a single $sign will allow z equal x plus y to appear in line, or if we had a really complicated one, rather than just Pythagoras, we could use $2 signs and things will appear in text. We can add images. So I'm using R a lot, and but we can use all sorts of different coding structures. I know we've got Denny online. Denny is a big fan of Julia, and maybe download Julia yesterday. We have Julia. You can use Julia within Markdown, C, Fortran, definitely Python. You can, Python and R are now pretty interactive a bit. With the reticulate package, you can do things, do a lot of stuff in Python. And so I've done that here. If I scroll down, I'll go past my images where I've got figure line. If I jump down to the engines, so we can, it's a matter of calling where we have our code chunk, instead of typing R in our code chunk, we can type the language that we want to use and it will return things. I'm not a Python expert, so I had to go for something really, really simple. I wrote a function, squaring a value, return a times a, and square, and it gives us back our Python. Same with bash. When I was doing the work for the postdocs and trying to grab heaps of information out of our sequence data, I was using bash and command line within the RMarkdown document a lot. And we can look at all the engines we want with names. And so awk, bash, coffee, groovy, Haskell, Lean, MySQL, nodes, Python, Julia, Go, SQL, CSS, Block2. There's things I've never heard of that you can call within. Right, a question, can we use output data from one language as input data from another? So object, if you output an object in Python, I believe you can now read that object with R. But if you're outputting to a text file, then you're going to read it back in as a text file in something else. Or if I'm using command line, if I'm doing some sequence analysis, I might be using VCF tools to generate a VCF file. I could then interrogate that VCF file with bash, or I could interrogate that VCF file with R using some relevant R packages. I suspect Python is the same as well. If your output is text-based or text-based flat file, then you can read it with whatever tools can read, whatever other tools will read a text-based flat file. So yeah, there is a lot of flexibility. So don't think of that as an RMarkdown. Don't think of that as a Markdown issue. Think of that as the tools you're using to do analysis. I mean, R is just the way I've learned to do a lot of things, but the further on I've gone in my career, bash scripting and whatever tools are available. I was doing some machine learning for the last year, and I had to confront my nemesis of Python, because that's the tool of choice for doing a lot of image analysis and machine learning. So try and be agnostic on your tools when it comes to that kind of question. I'm looking at the time, we've got 12:40. So citations, a bib file, right? So I know this kind of feels like we're jumping over things, but when Megan asked me to do this, it's like, well, how long's a piece of string? So we're just trying to give an overview. Citations, again, as I said before, was one of the things that I was pretty keen on about writing reports where I'm linking my code and linking some of my reference papers into why I've done some analysis. In the GitHub repo, I have put the dummy bib file there. I'm going to scroll very quickly back to the top of my Markdown document. So you'll see that in the resources there is a .bib file. It only has 3 papers in it, I think. If we can scroll to resources and we'll open the bib. I use Mendeley, you use OneNote, use whatever you like to generate your bib file and generate whatever your bib, whatever's required. This is my way of working on things. And so I touched on it earlier. If we scroll back down to images, engines, Python, citations. Oh, I should be using, really cool, sorry, I should have been using this. Really cool thing about RStudio. I think it's version 1.4, it may have been the previous versions. with my headers, I can jump around my document here instead of having to scroll. So sorry, back to what we're talking about within the document. So I can add an inline citation. So within inline, I've written in square brackets. This is Alison Horst, so citing the Palmer Penguins data set, and that appears, I'm looking again then on the right, citing the Palmer data set, and that kind of looks like how we would cite things in a paper often. If we cite R, we cite that like that, and it comes Rossi, Harker, and so the R core team 2020, or inline as the R core team at .r, and the publication like that. But what is really cool about the citations is we can change the styles. If we go to Zotero, if I click the Zotero link, it might be Zotero, there are something like 9,000 styles of citation. And you can generate, and you can get a little citation file, download it, and change how your document will look. So we had a particular style just before, and I have a second one. So I was using the citation style from the New Zealand Veterinary Journal because these were penguins. Penguins kind of maybe a bit of a vet type thing. If I change that to CSL, I'm going to change to the molecular ecology CSL and reknit my document. Fingers crossed, because I haven't done this for a while, that the citation looks a little bit different. I used to have Nature in here because everybody likes to have their Nature publication. I've got one. Nature Genomics, I think, something. I'm not sure, I can't remember. Waiting. Waiting, here we go. Okay, cool, it did change. I think it changed. I think these look different. Previously, I think for the Journal of Ecology, the authors were in bold. I'm pretty sure the authors were in bold. Anyway, you can change the citation styles. And then if I scroll down to citations, and it auto-reference, and we had our asterisks references section, and everything pops into the references at the bottom of the document, and we don't have to fill it out, much like Word. What other cool things? Right, other cool things, looking at questions. One of the other cool things about Markdown is parameterized reports. So this is where you might have 3 data sets, but you want to create exactly the same report every single time, and for the different data sets, and have it generate new file names, new plots, new headers. And you can do that with a little variation in the YAML header. So I've opened my Markdown _ parameters RMD, and we add in some parameters, and we add in some default values. So we'd like a parameter for island. So our penguins come from 3 different islands, and we would then like a parameter for our output document. And we can then add that to our data set. Which data set do we want to read? Our params $island. And so we had our params and island would be Bisco. And then the same, scrolling a little bit further down, where params island. So we can fit that through within the document. Now I need to go to, no, I don't want to. Why am I trying? I'm trying to get it in. Oh, we're going to have a catastrophic fail here. I'm going to jump over to the repo. I'd like to go to, no, Markdown extended. Parameterization. Ask. Cool. It's not this document. So I'm looking at my Markdown extended document. It's got some code for us. So it's got a little bit more about the parameterization and rendering of our documents. Because what was cool, what we can do is take our Penguins data set. So we have our draft document, our Markdown underscore parameters document. We can write a function for rendering our report and get the report to scroll through a list. So if I think I'm going to have trouble here, because I think, yeah, all right, let's now write, cool. So we could render the report for a single island, or we could pass in a list of islands and generate a whole lot of reports. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to take a list, and we have our report function that we've written, which is to render from our Markdown, our parameters RMD, so our draft document. We are going to pass in a list of parameters for island and document title, and we want those to be the same thing. And we're going to generate an output file of penguins underscore, whatever the parameter is, and then HTML. And I'm going to use the per package per will walk across our list. I'm going to use per to generate all our documents. And we have, generating slowly, we have Markdown generating. Right, here we go. Bisco Markdown, penguins, Bisco HTML, Torgerson HTML. And if I open that one, that is our Bisco Island report. And if I open Torgerson, view in a web browser, you can see, so we've generated basically the same report, 2 different titles, 2 different summary tables, because there's different summary data sets, and 2 different plots. So we generate a base Markdown document, and then we can generate multiple reports, and removing all that copying and pasting from things, and removing a lot of those mistakes. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and I can see it's 10 to 1, and I know that in this office here, we are going to have another meeting. There's going to be another VC come up at 10 to 1. So open up to 10 minutes discussion or other things that you'd like to talk about. I'm not even attempting to scratch the surface of RMarkdown, really. If I there's other, I mean, how long is a piece of string? RMarkdown for Scientists is a really cool resource from Nick Tierney. But Hugh Wager's definitive Markdown book is really cool. Oh, one thing I did want to touch on. Will this document be available? Yes, online. Yes, it is. This whole, if you missed the whole GitHub repo, my GitHub repo, which has all of this, is, I'll post that into the, you'll be able to find, so I can generate all the HTML documents and push them up into the GitHub repo. But all the example RMDs are all there, and the ability to download the whole repo, set up, use all the packages and things are all online. Now, one of the things I was going to touch on, we can't do this quite yet, but those who are familiar with NeSI, and you can go and using NeSI, using Maui and Mawika, we can also access via Jupyter Labs, and Jupyter Labs jumped into, can I have a thumbs up from Megan? I can see Megan and Dinny. Can you see Jupyter Labs has jumped up there? Cool, thank you. We can write Markdown files within Jupyter Labs. But as you've seen, I've been using RStudio. I talked to Maxime, who has set this up, who's been setting this up recently. Please don't bombard Maxime to use RStudio on NeSI quite yet. There isn't the bandwidth. But I can open an RStudio session within NeSI and do all this stuff. I can access my big data sets on NeSI, and I can do, yeah, file, new file, RMarkdown, set up everything how I want to do things, knit my draft document, get my summary exactly the same way that I can do things on my desktop. I can now do that up on NeSI and Jupyter. And if I was in the correct directory, but I'm not, and I'm not going to jump around, I would be able to go right-click, download. Over on the launch, I'd be able to go right-click, download, and bring that Markdown document back to me, or bring back my HTML on my Word document back to me. Things I haven't touched on. I've steered clear of Word, and I apologize for that. We had a on the Carpentries Slack channel, we had a chat, and one of the things everybody wants is Word. And how to get really nice outputs in Word. It's not easy. Output in Word isn't straightforward, but it can be done. You need a template document. So one of the things that I do find pretty cool then is to download journal styles. There is a package called Articles. Again, you'll be able to get into from the GitHub repo, download the Articles package, and you can then use, when I go file, new file, Markdown from a template, you can use a large number of journal templates that give pretty cool outputs. I have grabbed 2 already. So I grabbed the bioinformatics and generated the dummy template, the dummy file. And so this is where you can go. This is like some of the neat stuff you can do. This is generated from Markdown. And you would go in and from the dummy file, draft file, you could put in your own information. Those take for today. Can you say a bit about Markdown versus Bookdown? Bookdown is an extension on Markdown. I didn't see who wrote that. I'm wondering if Murray Cadzow is here, because Murray Cadzow wrote his PhD in Bookdown. Bookdown is what Huiger actually uses to write the, hang on, I'm very quickly jumping over to Murray's links. Where's Murray's, where's my, Markdown, the definitive guide. Think of it as chapters, and each of these chapters is its own Markdown document. There's a lot more development has gone into it. It extends everything out that we're able to do, and it helps with the citations. Citations, helps with formatting, helps with figures. Okay, does the notebook take a snapshot of your work in that particular session in Jupyter? I'm going to call upon Denny to answer that one.
The notebook take a snapshot. Yeah, the notebook will be saved in a way, but if you do it in our studio, I'm not quite sure how it's going to be, but if you're using a standard notebook, yeah, it will get a snapshot and tag.
Sorry, I missed that. I left that to Denny.
I'll answer it on the Google Doc.
We are going to have to jump out in 1.5 minutes time. And so
I can do a quick wrap up if that's all right, Matt.
Yeah, for sure.
Okie doke. Cool. Thanks guys for coming. So that's it for the webinar we have today. Before you go, I'm just going to point you back to that shared Google Doc that we had before. At the top of the document, there are a bunch of our Markdown resources, and there's also the GitHub link where Matt was doing his presentation from today. If you have any NeSI specific questions, as always, reach out to support@nesi.org.nz. But that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the webinar, and thank you so much, Matt, for presenting for us today.
Yeah, look, really happy to help if people have got questions and things. I don't know whether I've got an email in that GitHub repo, but yeah, contact me at NeSI or Megan or somebody. I'm happy to chat and talk and Google.
Thanks, guys. Have a great afternoon.